For 15 years in community service organisations, 4 years heading up Anglicare. Prior to that, 11 years with World Vision. Excellent job at both. During his time in Asia, he overnighted World Vision's $400 million response to the Asian tsunami in December 2004. From 74 to 94, Lynn served in the South Australian Parliament, which included 11 years in Cabinet, 10 years as a Minister, just over 1 year as Premier. He is smiling, yes. It was a bit of a nervous look in case you were frowning at me. He served in a wide range of portfolios, never having less than 3 separate portfolios at one time. How did he do it? Lynn is married to Elaine. They have 5 children, including 2 sets of twins. Lucky old you, Lynn, eh? And at last count, 8 grandchildren. Might have ticked over since we've been at lunch. In 2001, he was awarded a Centenary Medal, and in 2003 he was made an Order in the General Division of the Order of Australia for services to international development and, of course, Parliament. Please make welcome to the stage the Honourable Rev Lynn Arnold.
Your Excellency, Uncle Rod O'Brien, District Governor Craig Dowling and Kiki, President Cam Pearce and Robin, members of Rotary, guests of Rotary, distinguished guests all. Thank you very much, Mike, for your warm introduction. It's great to be here today. Naina Mane, on this historic occasion of this Inberendi on Kaurna land, where we celebrate 100 years of magnificent community contribution. And what a wonderful occasion it is today, a celebration of a century of Rotary in Adelaide. 100 years ago on this day, the Rotary Club of Adelaide was formed, only a little over 2 years after the Rotary clubs in Australia were first established in Sydney and in Melbourne, and 18 years after the first Rotary club in the world in Chicago in February 1905. The wonder and joy of this past century of activity has been so beautifully captured in Zing Hai Tan's 100 Not Out, an insight into 100 years of Rotary Club of Adelaide. Reading this special volume, I was struck by the luminaries of South Australian life over the past century who get a mention. I was also impressed by the way in which the book captured so redolently the development of Adelaide society over the period which started only 87 years after Colonel William Light named this patch of God's earth as the capital of the new colony of South Australia. Now, I'm sure the different photos from the book will speak to each of us. For me, the Rotary balls and dances held at the old Palais Royal, the old Grand Central Hotel where the first meeting of Rotary took place, and where later Sir Arthur Conan Doyle would be a guest, and the Rotary Adelaide first meeting held there. The Holden's Motorbody Works, along with photos of iconic brand names such as Clarksons, Motterham's, Simpsons and Balfours, all stood out to me. Then there was the reporting of such an amazing array of speakers who have addressed Rotary Adelaide over the century. And Gildy, you did an amazing job in your few minutes in capturing just what a spread of people did speak at this club. As your centenary speaker today, I'm honoured to be among a list that has included, as Gildy mentioned, Amy Johnson, the first woman to fly from England to Australia, Sir Douglas Mawson, and Sir Thomas Playford, who would speak at this club on a number of occasions, but first did so in 1941 when he spoke of his plans for Lee Creek Coal to provide cheap energy which would end up enabling the wonderful industrialising of South Australia, over which he presided during his record term as Premier. I also note that the very first guest speaker to the then male-only Rotary Adelaide was Mary Dingman, who spoke, as Gildy mentioned, on the subject of the human factor in industry. But for me, the most powerful impact of the book has been its recording of the ceaseless passion of Rotary Adelaide members to serve the community and how they served. In so many different ways, and doing so with such great impact. Tangible help to South Australians in need during the Great Depression, aid to Malta, Russia and Britain during World War II, the billeting of visitors to the first Adelaide Festival of Arts, supporting Janet Mead's Garden of Mercy, feeding the homeless in the 1980s, as well as assisting the development of health and education in the Philippines, and one of this year's centenary projects, building chronic disease prevention in Aboriginal communities. All of this happened during what was one of the most dramatic centuries of the past 2,000 years, a century which saw the two biggest multinational conflicts in world history, the most far-reaching depression ever, the birth of global dictatorial isms that sought to impose an ultimately toxic utopianism upon the ceaseless endeavour of humanity to learn from the past in order to create a better future. In his play, The Tempest, William Shakespeare had these words spoken by Antonio: "What is past is prologue." These words not only speak to us today, clearly they have spoken to Rotary Club of Adelaide members over the past century. Not only did this club establish a strong fellowship amongst its members, nor only provide members with what might just be occupational therapy through doing good works, the members of this club clearly wanted their service to make a meaningful difference to the world in which they all lived, ensuring that past problems might not poison future possibilities. They wanted to be appropriately informed not only about local events, but also about the changing world around them. Why else, as storm clouds of war gathered, would they have wanted to hear Yasuki Tsurumi, a Japanese MP in 1937, speak about the challenge of new forces and intellectual thinking in Japan at the time? Or Rabbi Israel Brody, in that same year, presciently speaking about Britain and Palestine. Much more recently, as we have all in the past decade commemorated the sacrifice and mourned the suffering of the Great War, supposedly the war to end all wars, you invited Dr. Jane Lomax-Smith in 2018 to speak on Dernancourt Remembers, but Adelaide Forgets, the story of a special relationship, and chose the occasion to inaugurate the Rotary Peace Polls as a reminder that peace, while universally desired, can also be elusive and fragile. And we've heard a number of references about those peace polls here today. So here we are today, celebrating a wonderful century of Rotary Adelaide. But in your invitation to me to speak on this great occasion, I gather I was not expected to deliver merely a paean of praise, a homily of ceaseless congratulation, but in the words of Heidi Unverboten, to help guide us into the present and into the future of Rotary Adelaide. I've taken this invitation to mean that you wish me to address the coming century, which faces all of us. While it is somewhat presumptuous of me to attempt to respond to such an invitation, let me try. And I start by noting the very impressive 7 pillars of Rotary mission, goals to which, as an international fellowship, you have committed yourselves: promoting peace, fighting disease, including polio, providing clean water, saving mothers and children, supporting education, growing local economies, protecting the environment. Each of these are undoubtedly meritorious, but their execution can be handled at differing levels of profundity, from tokenism to wind-changing import. Doing the former could mean that you could tick each of the 7 boxes. To choose the latter would mean that you would need to think strategically about not only your capacity, but your will to make a sustainable difference. Your Excellency, I found your words about Rotary, because you care and because you can, being key to this opportunity that lies before Rotary Adelaide. It will be in your hands and those of your successors as to which direction Rotary Adelaide will choose to go. But as you reflect upon that choice, I remind you not only of the club's impressive past, but also want to encourage you about the possibility that this club can be part of the changing of winds in a world that seems increasingly turbulent and wayward. Indeed, may I not only encourage you, but implore you to take on that challenge. I know such encouragement would not be unrealistic, for with the wonderful End Polio campaign as an example, Rotary has shown how it can play a major part in changing the direction of the wind of some of the world's ills. What is past is prologue, Shakespeare had written. That memorable phrase is sometimes seriously misunderstood to mean that history always repeats itself. Of course it can, but the opportunity ceaselessly offers itself for us to break such a bleak cycle of historic repetition, but only if we challenge prevailing winds. I've mentioned that the past century was almost like almost none of the previous 20 before it in terms of cataclysmic significance. Yet, the reality is that the century ahead, not only for Rotary Adelaide, but for each of us and our descendants, will almost certainly be no less cataclysmic than its predecessor. Rotary Adelaide sought to navigate the past century meaningfully. Will it do the same in the coming 100 years? Only you and the members to come over the next 10 decades can answer that question. We live in what has been called the information age, and also at the start of what has recently been referred to as the Anthropocene epoch. And as we move forward, we find that artificial general intelligence has developed more rapidly and more extensively than expected. All of this has occurred at a time when humanity has become both more globalised and yet more atomized or compartmentalized at the same time. It would not be an oxymoron to say that all this presents us all with both opportunities and difficulties. We will expect our institutions of governance to help us navigate all the challenges and take advantage of all the opportunities. Yet, without civil society, consisting of each of us as individuals and in organisations such as Rotary, our institutions of governance will be inadequate to the task. Turning first to the supposed information age in which we live, it was in 2000 that James Kuklinski and other political scientists at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana described the difference between two groups of people, the uninformed and the misinformed. They defined the misinformed this way: people are misinformed when they confidently hold wrong beliefs. They contrasted the misinformed with the uninformed, who will let go of beliefs proven to be incorrect when they are informed otherwise. For the misinformed, however, their beliefs become indistinguishable from hard data in their own minds, even when objective information contradicts those beliefs. In other words, facts that contradict their views do not change them. They reinforce their prejudices. This is in itself a significant dilemma for ongoing healthy human communion if significant portions of the world find comfort in the camp of the misinformed, turning their back on the power of information. However, there is an additional dilemma that concerns the very concept of information itself, namely of its pretension to be intransigently absolute. In an excellent piece in The Australian of August the 18th, Henry Ergus wrote, "The fundamental disputes about the world we live in," John Locke wrote, "are matters of judgment and opinion, not knowledge and certainty, whose resolution could only be based on reason, guided by grounds of probability." Ergus continued, Judgments and opinions would inevitably differ. However, the differences were not to be feared. For civil strife's root cause was not disagreement, but the determination to compel others to be of my mind or censure and malign them if they are not. The Apostle Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, wrote, "For now I see through a glass darkly," admitting that though he was certain of an absolute truth, he could not be fully privy to that truth in all its complexity and wonder this side of the grave. So the extent to which we recognise the limits of each of us to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, maps our capacity to participate in real communication with others, to interrogate our own presumptions with new thoughts and information. Civil society is a wonderful arena for this to happen. Organisations like Rotary are ideal for fostering such openness of mind to learn about and to understand that many challenges which will lie ahead in the coming century. My reference to the Anthropocene epoch refers to the growing school of thought that, in geological terms, the planet has entered a successor phase to the Holocene of the past 11,500 years, as a result of humanity now having had an observable and significant impact upon the planet. But before any of you choose to put up your personal defences or offences about the proposition that humanity may or may not be involved in climate change, can I deflect you back to the terrain upon which I am certain we would all agree as to human impact upon our planet? Our rubbish. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a collection of human detritus coalesced together by a vortex of currents now covering 1.6 million kilometres of the Pacific Ocean. It is the biggest of 5 gyres, as these garbage patches are called, which have also been observed in the Indian and Atlantic Oceans. There is the further aspect to this mass of floating rubbish. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has estimated that at present the oceans of the planet contain 165 million tonnes of plastic, equivalent to 20% of the estimated biomass of fish in the oceans, and that on current patterns, by 2050, that mass of plastic will exceed the biomass of fish in our oceans. Now, hopefully, government fiat will endeavour to address such challenges at both the national and international levels. Yet, the truth of the matter is that governments are more reactive than proactive. They very seldom move any distance in advance of the community. So civil society not only has the opportunity, but the responsibility to inform the community narrative about such issues as the impact of our mass rubbishing of our planet, along with many other environmental and societal issues. The third area I wish to raise is that of artificial general intelligence and the spectre of its potential for autonomy in decision-making. Now, I do so not just because I may have seen an episode, a replay of The Terminator, and therefore am not seeking our own Sarah Connor to protect us from futurist cyborgs, from coming back to gun us down. No, the issue I raise today is about how civil society will respond to the ethical challenges of the rapid advances in artificial general intelligence. To focus your thinking, let me draw your attention to a law formulated by A.C. Grayling, which is relevant to many areas of contemporary life, but especially to AGI. His law states, anything that can be done will be done. So Grayling's law tells us that if there's the possibility to do it, somebody somewhere will do it. And how do we address the ethical challenges of that? Now, what we need to understand is that it is not technology per se or robots which should worry us, but the human agency that is involved. The Oxford mathematician Professor John Lennox has addressed this aspect, saying, You've got to program the technology ethically. And of course, the ethical norms that will be built in are the ethics of the people who do the programming. That raises huge questions, and even more difficult is the matter of autonomous weapons. Another issue Lennox raises is the fact that we're all involved in AI. That is, any one of us who owns a smartphone, it's tracking us all the time. So we have surveillance in that sense, which is economically vastly profitable. We're contributing without our permission, and we're doing this voluntarily. This is eventually going to hit us really hard, and we begin to see there are problems with it. And Lennox says he encourages the young scientifically and computer literate people to get into AI. Firstly, to do the good stuff, developing, say, medical research that will help humanity, but also to be there to make a contribution to the ethics, which are so vitally important. And that begs the question, so how do we in civil society, how do you in organisations like Rotary, over the coming century, address the issue of the ethical import of artificial general intelligence on our community? I quoted William Shakespeare earlier in commenting upon the past's impact upon the present. Let me once again quote the bard writing about the future. In his play, Julius Caesar, he has Cassius, who you might remember was rather dooming of Caesar. He wrote these words, "It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves." So as I congratulate you on your past service and cajole you about future opportunities, may you hold high the message that our destiny can either be within ourselves, or we may opt to be mere corks bobbing upon an ocean of circumstance, occasionally waving our arms to keep our heads above the waters, but essentially not seeking to change the future through our service. Rotary defines itself as non-partisan and non-sectarian. But in the best sense of the word, you are not non-political, for you are an eminent expression of the polis, the community in action. And while you reject sectarianism and stand aside from religious expression, you are advocates of hope and have unerring faith in the possible. A century from now, at a celebration like this, will your future history have been written in a way that would indicate you were active and meaningful members of the polis, and that your hope and faith did not flag, that you confronted the winds that needed redirecting and did so?